Hey, everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. On this episode, I've got a really good friend of mine who also happens to be a senior design manager at Stellantis. This is a guy with more talent in his small toe as far as design goes than I have in my entire being. And I am constantly impressed, shocked, and enamored with the artwork that he turns out. Dan, how are you doing today, bud?
Good, man. How are you? Thanks for the intro. I'm honored. I'm just really flattered that you chose me for this podcast and flattered by all the comments. So thank you very much. It means a lot
Oh,
coming from you.
dude, absolutely. I mean, so here's the thing. I want to tee Dan up a little bit because if you follow Dan, and Dan, right now, just throw it out. What's your Instagram handle?
DMZ73.
Okay, DMZ73 on Instagram. What I want everybody who's listening to this podcast after the podcast to do is I want you to go to Dan's Instagram page and start scrolling through the sketches that he does, because I'm astonished every time he puts one up, because this is a man that has the capacity in the automotive world to tell an entire story in a sketch. And I am constantly blown away by that. So, but before we get into how you do that, let's talk a little bit about how you got into art, how you got
Sure.
into design, and what kind of what spurred you into the world of cars as opposed to, say, I don't know, designing teapots or something like that.
Man, that's going back a ways. So I grew up around cars, right? So I grew up on the East Coast. I was born in Connecticut and raised outside of Boston. But I was fortunate because my grandfather had an automotive shop. So he was a body man by trade. So my dad was usually tinkering around in his car. He had a 70 Challenger, and I had like the instantaneous connection with that car. And you could not miss that car. It was sublime paint. So I
Mhm.
always had like these fond memories of going to car shows in the Challenger. But my mom had a bug, right? So it's like, either way, I was, totally imbued in this culture. And my dad and my grandfather would take me to Wild Wheels, the whatever it was, what was that show called? Wild Wheels or something like that when we used to go.
World of Wheels or something like that. Yeah,
Wild World of Wheels, right?
yeah,
And I got to go, and at the time I was a kid, Dukes of Hazzard was popular,
yeah,
and the Green Machine, I'm a child of the
yep,
70s, so it's like there was all this automotive culture on TV. So I was like
yeah.
really inspired by that, right? So I got to, taking around, messing around, and pulling apart my dad's car at a really young age, and getting in trouble for that. And I remember going to the shop and looking through my grandfather's build books. And this guy, I mean, he was a designer like through and through, but he didn't know it. He was just like an active problem solver. He was a, kind of a bit of a hot rodder. So he'd figure out how to
Yeah.
shade handles off of cars and led some stuff together and paste cars together. So I was always like really intrigued. So I started going to these car shows and looking at all these like books and stuff like that, and go to the library and looking at these you know big trucks and heavy equipment books, and I draw stuff out and I bring it to my grandfather, like, hey, can you take a look at this? And he was like, why is the door handle here? It should be here. He's like, you've got like this mirror here. He's like, the wheel is seems like it's in the wrong place. And I'd be like, oh yeah, you're right. And I go back and I'd sketch on it some more, and I pretty much I'd just like go through all of these like he had these like receipt books, like
Hmm.
quote books and everything that had his shop name on it. And I would just fill these pads with these things. And pretty soon it was like pasted all over the place. So in grade school, like my teacher, they would come around in these carts with,
Yeah,
crayons and markers
yeah.
and pencils. And it's like, I don't know, they didn't have ADHD back then, right? So like I was just constantly doodling and stuff and drawing and going to the art in the cart. And the teacher would literally have to pry this stuff out of my hands, like, stop drawing, pay attention,
Yeah,
Zimmerman.
yeah,
So it got to be where they started noticing that I had this talent. So I was drawing heavy equipment. And this little town that I grew up in, I had this art show and I pasted all my stuff up there. From what I hear, my artwork's still there. So just kind of
really.
funny. But as I moved here to Detroit, like in '85, I'm into art and everything, and I'm into to doing all this stuff, and I was drawing on walls. I was just constantly drawing, and just
Yeah,
just this incessant like need to just keep creating. So I moved
Yeah.
here in 85, and it's like, you come from the East Coast, you're like, oh, you're going to go to Michigan. It's like, what's Michigan? What is that? And it's like,
Cold.
and then suddenly it dawned on me. I think it was after my dad told me, it's like, well, that's where they make cars. I was like, what?
Yeah.
I was like instantaneously just
Yeah.
drawn to it. So I moved here, and little did I know that the I guess you could say the automotive executives, automotive royalty was all around, and the kids we're all the same age, so we all grew up together. So we're all around design. We didn't even know it.
Huh.
So I took an art class in middle school, and this new kid he came in from Arizona, and he's like, "Hey, you're drawing a car. I know someone in the other class is drawing a car." So he'd snatch my piece of paper, bring it to the kid in the other class. The kid would make corrections, bring it back to me, and I'd start
Huh.
drawing, and I'd just keep going. So this was going back and forth. So this kid and I just became instantaneous friends, and
And
it
how
was
how old were
awesome.
you?
I was probably 12, something like that when I came here.
Okay.
So we hit it off, and so we would just kind of hang out with each other and draw. But little did I know that this kid's father was an automotive VP, and
Huh.
we just kind of hit it off, and it never really dawned on me. So we had this art class, and for some reason, I don't know if it was something in the water, but there were a whole bunch of creative kids in the class, and the art teacher was close to retirement, and he was a salty old dude. I was getting in trouble at school for drawing and not paying
Yeah.
attention in math, and so I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in life. And I went to my counselor, and the counselor's like, you want to be a what? A designer? Oh, you need to go to engineering school. And I'm like, what? I'm like, how does that work? I'm like, I'm not good
Yeah.
at math. I'm like, have you
Yeah.
seen my math grades? Right? I'm like, there's more drawings on my math grades than there is
Yeah.
math, right? So there was no internet back then or nothing, and you had magazines and everything. So I'd
Yeah, of
pick up Hot
course.
Rod magazine and stuff and look through, and you'd see like automobile magazines. You'd see like Steve Sanford or somebody or anybody drawing and contributing. Tom Taylor contributing
Yeah.
sketches, and Larry Erickson. It was like, holy cow, that's what I want to do. So I went, talked to my art teacher and everything, and he's like, "Oh, it's interesting." He's like, "I went to CCS. He was an illustrator, so he had all these people around him, all the kids, all the students, and there was a vast majority of us that were into art. We were serious about art. So the teacher just like the guy was like probably a couple years away from retirement. He sat
Yeah.
down and he was like, "I've never had so many talented students before." He's like, "I got to do something here."
Yeah.
So he kind of sat down with his faculty and figured out a way to create an actual studio course for us, a portfolio prep course, where it
Really?
was like literally he talked to everybody in the whole building and got them to align and do like a 3 hour art class for us. So it was like literally half the day. We're all like AP
Yeah.
art students or whatever. So out of like, I want to say there were probably 12, maybe I would say there were in the realm of 18 people there. I think 12 took art very seriously, and I think
Yeah.
eight eight or 10 made it to serious art careers in the industry.
Wow.
So I mean, it was a unbelievable time in high school. So creating a portfolio prep class and just creating all this art, and I'd be doing this automotive work, and I wasn't sure I'd be an automotive designer. I had other friends that
Right.
liked toys and stuff like that.
Sure.
And I went to a couple of college tours. I went, looked at RISD. I looked
Yep.
at I think I looked at Pratt. I looked at Art Center. I looked at CCS. At the
Yep.
time, CCS was kind of dumpy. But then I
Yeah.
went to Cleveland Institute of Art, and I looked around at the campus. I looked at the accreditations of the school. I
Yeah.
looked at the hiring rate and everything, and I was like, wow, this is really cool. And at the time, I just I didn't know how important it was, and it was
Yeah.
like
Well, you
just
never
kind
do
of
at that
follows.
age though, right?
Yeah, you just you're a teenager trying to figure out what you want to do in life, and at the same time, I was building hot rods for people. I was painting cars, right? So my
Wow.
my background is a little bit in
Yeah.
fabrication.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
um, but I always loved doing body work because my grandfather taught me. So I was like kind of more hands on. So I'm like, man, I don't know. Maybe I should just take a break and just build
Yeah.
cars for people and stuff. So I was building cars over the summertime, and I'm horrible at business, just horrible at that side of business as a teenager. So trying to take a little bit of break before starting our art school and everything. So I'm like, maybe I should just take a run at this and just build cars. Like Chip Foos was coming up. I'm like,
Yeah.
maybe I could do something like that.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
I built, painted a couple cars for people, and I did this one Carmen Gia, and then it made me kind of step back and take note. I'm like, man, this is a lot of work, and this is shaving years off my freaking life.
Yeah. That's why
So,
body men are few and far between these days, like good
yeah,
ones.
yeah. So anyway, so I ended up, choosing Cleveland Institute of Art. And what's funny is the kid that I met in grade school that we were trading off doing
Yeah.
artwork. We kind of came back from vacation, and we're like, "Hey, where are you going to art school?" I'm like,
Yeah.
I got to tell you where I'm going to go." And he's like, "Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going to tell you where I'm going to go." So it turns out we both selected the same college just by happenstance.
Oh, wow.
So that course was kind of up and coming. So the automotive industry was kind of contributing to that school. They were contributing to
Sure.
Art Center. They were contributing to CCS. And I was absolutely enthralled. But the school was like, it was a fine art school. So they did like sculpture, they did painting, they did ceramics and everything. And I love art. I love just creating. I've always been
Yeah.
hands on. So I
Yeah.
did ceramics, I did painting and stuff, and like what else could you do? Jewelry. And I just had a blast at the school, just learning everything I could about, what it could be. And
Just a
I
big
was
sponge taking everything in.
just a sponge, man. I've always been like that, guy that has to absorb, has to learn something. Like I
Yeah.
gotta figure it out. Like I can't leave
Yeah.
it alone.
Yeah.
I'm the kid that would just keep going on the puzzle. It's like, when you get hooked on something, you just keep
Yeah.
going.
Dive it in.
So yeah. So I went there, and I met a lot of great people, and some that I'm so close with. Like these guys, it's like, you talk about ride or die. It's like they get me, right? And it's
Yeah.
like I'm
Right.
still
You
tight with
you
all
found
these
you found
people.
your people.
I found my people.
It's an
So
amazing thing when that happens, isn't it?
yeah, it is. And there's car guys there, but there's product guys there, right? So I latched on all these people and teachers, and we all hit it off. And the funny thing is, like, I probably was there. The foundation years were interesting because it was, more fine art and more design basics, and teaching about design theory and
Yeah.
drawing and all this stuff. And it's like you made all these memories with these incredible teachers and just super talented people that were so connected to the art industry,
Yeah.
but they also had like really bizarre ties back to Detroit, right?
Huh.
So we had these teachers that were so significant. Like, what I looked at for a school was, hey, does it have kind of an inventive principle, right? Is there an
Mhm.
entrepreneurial ish, tie?
Yeah.
Are there are people that are self starters there? Like who goes there, right? So I started looking,
Interesting.
but the teacher that we had, the guy was like, the guy probably designed more products, in the tune of 200 feet than anyone's ever done in their lifetime. Literally, you could walk out your mailbox and see like, 5, 10, 20 things that this guy's designed. I mean, the guy's been around forever.
Yeah.
So the guy's name was Victor Schreckengast. So Victor contributed to dinnerware, right? Clay,
Okay.
earthenware, like Fiesta ware. The
Yeah.
guy did, ever see those stamped chairs, that are like pastel in colored
Yeah.
stamp
Sure.
chairs? Victor, right? The banana seat, Victor.
Wow.
So all these like early mowers, but the one thing that guy did that is so significant in automobilia is the cab over. He was the guy that
Really?
figured that out. Yeah, he was the guy that like figured out aero styling on a cab over. He did the white cab.
Did he
So I mean,
really?
yeah. So this guy was just super nice. Just like the guy was so humble. He could create. He would look over your shoulder, stuff, walk around. The guy was, he's far retired, but he would still come in to the school and kind of contribute. And then you never knew how much this guy really did till kind of the later years in life. Like, holy cow! Like
Was he just
I
very
got to
humble about
interact with
everything?
him. What's that?
Was he very humble about stuff?
So humble, so humble. We go on field trips with him to the Hall of China, and you just like look around, and you like, that's my mold, that's my mold, that's my mold. they've been
Wow.
producing this stuff for 80, 100 years with this guy's work. And it's like, wow, you know, and he talk about section, he talk about drawing, and the guy, like, he could do anything. And I was like,
Yeah.
I want to be like that guy. I want to be able to
Yeah.
do anything, right? So that's kind of one of the biggest things that the draw for that school. I mean, the guy could paint, he could do watercolor, he's, you know, draw, he could
Were
design
there
stuff.
were guys like that when they had students like yourself? Would they identify certain aspects of art that you were great at, and would they push you towards that, or would you, or like, would they try to funnel you in a certain direction, or would they be like, listen, you're great at everything, you need some help here, we can move over here? Like, how did they try to mold you in a sense, and
Yeah,
and
you
how
know,
did they recognize that?
they would walk around, they would kind of pick up on your strengths, and they would
Hmm.
like kind of, you know, casually nod at your weaknesses, you know, and be like, well, maybe you should do it like this or whatever. Or, you know, hey, you know, that's some really good, strong line work. I really like that. You know,
Yeah.
you should really look at how you do this and look at your thick and thin over here and look at how you've done it here. Understand where the light's coming from. And they'd give you pointers. You know, we had another drawing teacher. We had two drawing teachers who was super memorable. Gary Warman and or sorry, Ralph Warman and Gary Schumer. So these guys were like the pinnacle of the industry of drawing. So
Yeah.
Gary Schumer, he was our foundation art teacher, foundation drawing teacher. And if this guy didn't like your stuff, if he didn't think that you did like put your energy into this work, he'd rip that piece of paper on the wall and
Wow.
stomp on it and be like, this is bullshit. I'm done with this. You know, you
Wow.
can't, you know, get out of my class. You're wasting my time. It was like, it was really serious in art school. So,
Yeah.
but he would like also give you like little drawing demos and stuff like that, or, hey, really look at this.
Yeah.
But then Gary, what you didn't realize was Gary was so good. He could really like, the guy could draw anything. I remember he did this slideshow for us. So like you talk about like inspiration for teachers.
Yeah.
This guy, he got bored with everything because he could draw everything, he could paint everything. So when he started doing his copying masterworks, right, that gives you this level, right?
Wow.
Then he starts projecting stuff on the master level and then repainting that and then drawing on top of that. It's like, how many layers of unbelievable are you? Right? So you look at this and it's like, man, I can't even equate how amazing this is. And then we
Yeah.
had other drawing teachers that they have stuff up in Cranbrook Art Museum. They do, you know, portraits of famous people.
Yeah.
Um, there's so much like wealth of knowledge. Like our design teacher would teach you
Yeah.
the design principles, things like, hey, you know, all of these shapes need to relate. In the Richard Fiorelli, the foundation designer, I mean, he really taught us to look holistically at design, and I
Yeah.
use that for everything that I do. Right?
Yeah.
Is, you know, he taught us like the smaller is to the greater is the whole. Right? Everything relates. Everything has like a family of unity of shapes, and if you
Yeah.
apply that to design, you're going to be successful, and you understand composition, proportion. You know, he understand like you keep analyzing something, and if you can
Yeah.
tie it together in a story as a whole, because you'll be that much more successful. But like whenever these guys were teaching you something, and like just they you would just listen, you just be in awe, like, oh my god, you might be hungover, but you'd be like,
Yeah, you're right.
wow, this is amazing. You know, like
Yeah.
holy cow, this is history in the making. But you know, you made a bond with people because you would be working so late at night, and there was like that like intense work ethic,
Yeah.
like just keep pushing, figure it out, like just
So
keep going.
then
And you had go ahead.
when did you start to make the transition then? So you go to art school. Now you have
Yeah,
this inspiration. You're being taught by true masters of the craft, right?
yeah.
Now you're thinking, okay, well, like you said, there were so many guys that had ties back to Detroit. Okay. So when did you realize, like, well, shit, I think I want to, like, again, you grew up in cars, your grandfather, your dad, all
Yeah,
this stuff.
yeah,
When did you realize you really wanted to start doing cars? Like, do you remember a certain moment
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah. So, the interesting thing was they had Cleveland Institute of Art didn't really have a major in automotive design, which is
yeah,
interesting. They had it as a minor, but it was a class on Saturdays, so which is highly unusual. So you would have to go to class on Saturdays. So, you know, you do your regular hours during the week to regular classes. So in second year, we would go down and see these artists, these designers drawing, and I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, this is it. This is, I
Yeah.
gotta try this. I gotta do this. So I'd
Yeah.
start sketching. You'd hang up your work and everything, and you'd have a critique, and people would offer you positive comments. And, then you'd go back and you'd do it all over again. It was like, again, the same thing since sixth grade, is someone doing drawings for you or giving you overlays, like
Sure.
ways to improve yourself. And it's like, automotive design is really weird. It's kind of like, human art, right? It's all gesture based, and you start looking at proportions just like a human, and it's like
Hmm.
there's a lot of distinct similarities between there. So in second year, I realized, man, I gotta do this. I'm like, I'm still a car guy. Like, I love art.
Yeah.
I love painting. I love sculpture. I love ceramics. But it's like, fabrication is cool. All this stuff is cool, but I know it's dangerous, and it's gonna eke off years of my life. I'm game with cars. I'm good. So
Right.
I think it was like second year that I realized, man, I got to do this. I got to go at this. And
Yeah.
third year, you can take automotive design class and really participate. And it was funny because I had this guy that I was really close with, and we just work late, and he and I just we became like this. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna use my Forrest Gump impersonation, like, we was like peanut butter and jelly. It's like, we couldn't be separated, and we just continued to do everything together, and
Yeah.
draw and design, and just be so we were in competition, but it was a friendly competition. And
Right.
there was the realization, but man, we're in this together. We got to just go, and we
Yeah.
got to just figure it out. So, but yeah, second year, it was game on. And I had people were trying to convince me otherwise. Like, my ceramics teacher's like, you should really do this as a major and whatever. It's like, yeah, I love that, but I can do that if I have a career in this,
Right. Right. Sure.
So
Absolutely.
yeah,
So let me ask
but
you,
yeah.
when it comes to automotive design, we
Hmm.
grew up as kids in the 70s, right? And I
Hmm.
think that we grew up before the world of cell phones, the world of real
Yeah,
technology. We
yeah,
grew
yeah,
up
yeah.
looking and playing with everything from hot rods from the 50s and 60s all the way through the 70s into the
Yes,
80s.
yeah, yep.
How pivotal was that? Because when I look back at cars, right, where everything was a tangible thing that you could put your hands on, and they were mechanical, and you could see physically how they worked, because they were absolute machines, as
Yes.
opposed to solid state iPhones that you have no, I don't, like, this is magic as far as I'm concerned. I don't know how the phone works, you know. But with a car and a design from back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, where there was so much beautiful sculpting and body
Yeah,
lines and
yeah.
mechanics,
Hmm.
and even the engines were works of art. How did how did that influence you? Like, do you look at stuff like that today and still go, Jesus,
Absolutely.
I can't believe they pulled that off.
Absolutely. So when I was a kid, I mean, I was convinced cars were going to fly. It's like the year 2000 came, and I was so disappointed. I'm like, come on, So it's like, I grew up watching Jetsons and everything, but I think
Yeah.
the most pivotal time in automotive history. I mean, there's several different eras, right? You can look at
Yeah.
streamlining as one. You can look at the jet age, right? So when Harley Euro came about and doing these unbelievable sculptures of cars with rocket shapes and chrome
Yeah.
everywhere, and just these amazing forms. And it was like, man, that was inspirational. And you looked at cars of the 60s and into the 70s, like, again, I'm a student of that. I'm just,
Yeah.
every single car show I've ever gone, that's what like got me into this, like going to car shows and like putting my hands on cars and wrenching and stuff. And like, there's a big part of that, being inspired and seeing these shows, like car shows, right? I mean, not just car shows, like
Oh
automotive
yeah.
programs.
Of course.
But yeah, I to me, it's like all of those eras, like there's a certain kind of like almost like lamenting that I didn't grow up in that
Uh-huh.
era,
Sure.
because I look at that, I'm like, man, that would have been so cool to be, listening to music, skinny ties and suits, and
Uh-huh.
drawing on these huge tables, and listen. I mean, it was like Mad Men, just total Mad Men for
Yeah.
sure.
Right.
But
Right,
I,
right,
I
right.
I don't know if that answered your question or not, but
No,
I
it
love that
does. And,
era.
and and I asked it because it's one of those things where, I mean, we all gravitate to certain things,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like for me, you know me, like I love old American cars. I love muscle cars. I
yeah,
think their shapes
yeah.
are amazing. I think they're, everything about them to me is they're handsome, they're
Yeah.
tough, they're elegant, they are America personified in an object, right?
Hmm.
You would never see, like, I'm looking at your sketches behind you. You would never see like that GMC or that Chevy box van behind you rolling down the street in Europe. They couldn't design something
Nope.
like that. Okay. The lowrider three wheeling, that would never be
No.
done anyplace else on the planet except for here in the US. And I think
Right.
that it's just one of those things that, yes, I'm fine. I'm a fan of Ferraris and Lamborghinis, but I could care less about them. I could care. To me, they're novelty. The classics, the 40s, 50s, 60s, 100%.
Yeah,
But the new
yeah,
ones, I could care less. They do nothing for me. Whereas when I see an old vintage Ferrari, an old vintage Dodge, an old vintage
yeah,
Ford,
yeah,
and I get so excited because, one, I love the idea that somebody actually did that by hand, that somebody
yeah,
sat down with a sketch pad and drew those shapes and contoured those lines and did all of that stuff, as opposed to using a machine to do it for them. Because I feel like that era was so much more personal than it is now, where
yeah.
the ideas came from an individual as opposed to a committee. And that's why I gravitate to them. But I asked you that question because so many of your sketches that you do have, like the one behind you, you have people absolutely working on cars and getting underneath them and playing with them. And these sketches that you do and these drawings, they tell an entire story in one scene. And it takes you back to a time where you're like, where kids
That's
that
it.
are
That's
younger than
it.
us will never be able to relate to that, because cars now won't physically let you do that, right? You can't physically do that to today's cars for the most
It's
part.
tougher to do it. It's not that you
It's
can't, it's just tougher.
it's
You need
tough.
an education to do that.
Yes, you do.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
You know?
And I think you hit the nail on the head. It's like there's inspiration in just that relationship, that interpersonal mechanical relationship you have with a car where you make it yours. Like I've noticed, like driving my car now, like on the road, I have people with classics that just they do the wave. And it's
They do
that
the wave.
wave of respect because
Yeah.
they know you're under that car, you're under the hood, you're over the hood, you're in and out of that car, working
Hmm.
your ass off to keep it running, and just like because they're sensitive little beasts, you know.
Yeah.
But funny. I'm
Yeah, you're good.
sorry. I'm a I love the 60s, and I think that like I missed my era, right? So somehow, some way, I don't know how it is, but like all these drawings that I do, like the 60s drawings, like the gassers and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like I don't know if you ever heard the Ram Chargers talk, but it was probably one of the most inspiring things I ever heard in my life in an
Okay.
as automotive, right, goes. Um, these guys figuring out, drag racing, like the fact that these guys were on the cusp of hot rodding and funny cars and figuring out what proportions work, weight
Yep.
distribution, using nitro, like listening to them tell the story, like calling up NASA, like, hey, what do you guys use nitromethane for? Bob's hang up. Hey, put that in that Hemi over there. Like seriously, like that's crazy. Like these people are crazy. So I draw these things at the strip, but like what you were talking about, Mike, is I want it, my artwork. Like I want that. I want that connection that says like
Yeah.
there's more to just drawing a car. It's like that experience of working on a car. Like there's every car tells a story. Every piece of artwork that you see down the road, somebody sweat over that. Somebody labored over it. And it's like they're proud of it, right? And it's like
Yeah.
um the drawing, sorry, up right there. So
Okay.
with the motor coming out of it, it's like the
Yep.
experience of building a car. It's like that's it's like cars have a lifetime, right? We're
Yeah.
custodians of these old things, right?
Right. Of
So
course.
they may be around way after we're gone. It's like you take care of it. It's like you can't see some of the other drawings that are up here, but like I do a lot of the automotive archaeology stuff. Like I love Ryan Brutt and what he does, and it's like I'm so inspired by
Hmm.
that. I used to do that stuff. I used to wander around, take pictures, go to junkyards, and poke
Yeah.
around and do photography. But then it's like I'm like, man, I miss that. There, all these junkyards are gone, and I'm like a
Yeah.
kid of the '60s. Like, used to be able to go into these yards and find these cars and buy them for pennies on the dollar, pull them
Yeah.
out and like fix them up, and like they'd be on the road, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's the story behind the car and making it something, right?
Right.
But that to me is like that's kind of what makes me different than a lot of other people. It's like I want to tell that like that piece of the story,
So how
So
does that, so being a designer now, right? You worked on interiors, your master interior designer, exterior designer, all of that. How do you, let me ask you this. Do you have a preference? Do you prefer interior over exterior or vice versa? Or do you look at it as one holistic piece that as a puzzle that you have to solve and put together?
man, it is definitely one holistic puzzle. As I said, looking at shapes and everything, how they relate, and trying to tie things together. Like again, I go back to the saying from my design teachers: the smallest to the greatest to the whole. Right? All these shapes relate to each other. So the strongest designs have language from the exterior and the interior, and vice versa. I'm an interior guy, right? I've done these same things with interior drawings, but it's like
Hmm.
they might get a lot of likes and everything, and but nobody wants to hang a picture of an interior on the wall, you know like I don't get that. It's like you're in there all day. It's like, okay,
Right.
I live with this, right? It's good, right? So I do that, and I had been approached to do a Riddler car interior at one point in time, which was phenomenal, right? And it
Yeah.
was again, it was right before the pandemic, so it just never panned out. But it's like I love doing that. That's why
Yeah.
I'm in the industry, is because it's, to me, it's like you open up the door and it's just one big giant product, and it's all
Yeah.
about like the interpersonal relationship as um, as an occupant, as a fan of the car. Like you have to love it. You have to love the interior, but it has to be something that like you can't, like you have to be okay with it. It's not. It's a lovable moment, right? It has to be
Yeah.
something that you just love to do. You love to drive the car and be in the car and not be bothered by stupid things, right? But
Oh
you
yeah.
you go again. I do these drawings, and it's like no one wants to hang an interior on the wall, but it's like at the same time you don't want to be the criticism. You don't want to be like, oh, I bought this car and I absolutely hate the interior. It's full of plastic. It's garbage
Well,
and blah blah blah.
I
It's
mean,
like,
to your point, it's like interior is like you are there. That's where you're sitting. Nobody on the out, everybody's looking at the outside of a car, but when you, as the individual who the owner, operator, the steward of the car, it is such an important place to be, right? One,
mhm.
from an aesthetic perspective, right? Like I know when I get into the interiors of my cars, every single one is different, and whether it's an old truck, whether it's a muscle car, whether it's if it's something, something different,
Yeah.
there are certain design elements that you pick up. Like I am just a huge I'm not a massive tech fan. I just don't like it that much. I like things that are clean, that are simple, that are the
Hmm.
less the less buttons, the easier things are to use, the more intuitive it is, the better. Like
Right.
I'm a fan of like I get into every car that I test, and I'll put one hand on the steering wheel, I'll put one hand down on the console, and I'll close my eyes. And I will just
Does
take
it
my
feel
hand
good?
and I will move
That's
it
exactly
to,
it.
does it
Yep.
feel good? Where is it?
Yep.
Where should the HVAC button
Is
be?
everything
Where
in
should this
reach?
be? Is
Yep.
everything that's
Exactly.
right? And I
There's
think
no
so
difference
few,
between you and I there. No difference.
yeah,
That's
because
exactly it.
that makes all the difference in the world. And I mean, yes, we're moving to a phase, but we're not moving, we are there. I'm like touchscreens, yes, they're useful. I hate them. I absolutely loathe them. I understand the purpose of them, but I love tangible things. I love toggle switches. Like we just built at work,
Oh,
we just
toggle
finished
switches.
this project. Oh, we just did this Fox Body Mustang that we built, and
Yeah, cool.
the
Love
light
it.
the light switches on the panel were just these simple click click back and forth switches on the
Hmm.
console, and
Hmm.
it's not only did they look great, but there was
They
like a
feel
little
good.
They
It's the
feel good. And there was,
tactile feedback,
dude,
man. That's
and
what it's all about,
yeah,
right?
there was a little bit of fun every time. Like when the Ford GT came out in '05, all those toggles, those aircraft toggles that you could just go in
Oh
and just go click,
yeah.
click, 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 click. Like all I
I've
wanted
always
to do
wanted
was
that.
click
I've
switches,
always
right?
wanted that. Yeah. So going back away into my personal history at Stellantis. So I was I did a lot of concept cars. So
Mm-hmm.
I worked on the Jeep Hurricane. I did the interior for that with
Mm-hmm.
a buddy of mine. And it's like, the same thing rings true. It's like we had these two massive Hemi motors that were tied together with this crazy drivetrain. The car could crab, it could zero walk, everything. We had to
Yeah.
figure out the haptics of that and figure out the logic. But it's like, okay, well, I need toggle switches because this is like it's a machine. It's like
Right.
I want to feel the click, click, click. I want to see
Yeah.
lights come off, and but yeah, it's like that's the thing that is kind of missing in cars these days is that
Yeah.
definitive haptic feedback where it's like the slow click or the broken button. It's like
Dude,
it doesn't
1,000%.
right. So that's
Yeah.
that's the kind of stuff that I love, and when you restore a car, there's like this sense that you put it on a pinnacle, right? You put it on this pedestal. Like I'm going to make it just like this. It's going to be perfect. All these things are going to click
Yeah.
off just right. The doors are going to shut just perfect.
Right.
And it's like people miss out on that stuff, and they don't realize how much goes into that, or
Oh,
fixing that button and making it right and feel right.
yeah.
So
Yeah. And there is a science to that. And that
yeah,
adds
total.
so much to the experience of the vehicle.
Mhm.
It was interesting. A friend of mine had come over actually this weekend, and she had a McLaren, and she was testing a McLaren,
Awesome.
and I forget what it was. I think it was an Arturo or something along those lines. But you got in, and it was two buttons, and then the rest were screens. And it was fine, and you knew it was fast. It was shaped like a
Mhm.
cockroach, and you go, okay, I get it, I understand it, but I had zero desire to drive it
Hmm.
because there was
Interesting.
there was no excitement when you got into it. Whereby
Hmm.
if you were to get into something like another buddy of mine has an old Lamborghini Countach. Okay. You get
Mm.
into that car, and what do you see? You have this big blocked out dash with these massive analog gauges, a gated shifter. It's a roll up windows that big. You know that at some point this car is going to break. At some point that it as soon as you start it, it is an experience that is mechanical, that makes your body move because the car is trying to keep itself from blowing apart. You know, and there's just something about that in these older cars that's so analog
Mhm.
that I absolutely love. Where the new cars
Yeah, yeah.
don't have that. I mean, I think a perfect example of a car that still has that. Like listen, you guys have been building the Chargers and the Challengers for a long time. They are There's a reason those cars have such a cult following. It's because they're still analog. Yes, you have all the technology in the world. Yes, they do these amazing things. But when you hit that button, that thing comes to life, and there is a sense of theater involved there. There is a sense of carnival. There's a sense of bravado
That's
that
it, man. That's
as an
it.
owner, you get
That's
in
what
and you're
makes a
like,
good car is that sense
dude,
of theater. It's like it's this obligation to a car to entertain you. Like so car design is simple, right? I mean, when you really think about it as a whole, a successful design is all about fantasy, fulfilling a fantasy.
mm,
Beyond fulfilling a fantasy, it's about status, right? You check off those boxes, sold all day long, right? Again, it's the theater, right? It's like
right,
when I bought my 73 Challenger, it's like I had put it on a pedestal. I'm like, man, there's a theater about that car. It's like
yeah,
an air of performance on that car. I never drove one. I drove
right,
in one, right? And I don't know what kind of piece of junk it is, but it's like,
right.
there was a sense of like respect for that car. It's like, man, it must be amazing. But it's like, man, it's just a piece of junk built in the
Yes, they're
70s
all
and
garbage.
barely held together by bubblegum and hope. It's like, come on, all these old cars. It's like, but again, it's like the sense of theater because you press that gas and you could feel the linkage move with
Yeah,
everything and the spring and the friction of that. And then like the leaf springs winding up and hitting the bump stop and like the car shaking apart when you hit the
yeah,
accelerator, but you feel the motor, you feel the engine. Like, to me, it's like a good car has that presence where you feel the drivetrain, you feel like
Absolutely.
that. Again, it's the theater, right? That's
Yeah.
what's important.
So let me ask you. So now, when you look at cars and you look at cars from
Mhm.
all manufacturers and everything else, there
Everything.
is is there a car, like, do you look at everything and say, "Ooh, I would have tweaked that, or I might have done it that way," or is there a vehicle, or has there ever been a vehicle that you've looked at and been like, "I wouldn't change a thing"?
So again, I definitely fall into the student of the '70s. Like, to me, like the end all be all car is like the
Mhm.
'68 Charger. It's my total, dream, right? I love that
Mine
car,
too.
right?
As you know.
I definitely wouldn't change anything on that. It's just the Coke bottle styling on that car. It's just such a, to me, it's like a sex object. It's
Oh,
like
dude,
this
it's
like I just can't seem to attain it. That car definitely wouldn't change. I mean, there's probably every car out there, okay, it might tweak a little something, but I think
yeah.
if you really enjoy like the muscle car era, it's like you could take 69 through 71. It's like, damn it, you hit the nail on the head with each of these manufacturers. Like,
Yeah.
okay, you got me. It's like I look at a Mustang. I'm like, God, that thing is awesome. I would kill to have that one.
Yeah.
Like, I had a Datsun 240Z, a 70
Oh
Datsun
yeah.
240Z, the early one. Remarkable car, just remarkable. I would have loved to keep that car. I just love that car, right? I look at like, again, I'll look at what's another good one that's untouchable. Uh, God, I like a '63 Corvette, right? Just a
Yeah.
super sweet car, just beautiful, just absolutely beautiful. I look at a Lamborghini Countach, like, I wouldn't know how to drive it, but damn,
Right.
it's
But
so
look at that.
cool.
Yeah.
You know, the sound of that car is like hypnotizing. Like, these
Yeah.
cars sound like fighter planes. So I think I respect so many of these cars out of the era. Like, you can't see the rest of my room here, my studio, but it's all filled with Hot Wheels, right? So, and it's because I have this respect for automotive, just design in general.
Yeah.
Like, I can't collect the real thing, so I can collect the die cast. It's all good,
Absolutely. Oh yeah.
So, I look at like another car is uh the the Lancia, the Stratus, right? The
Stratus.
Stratus
Yeah.
is an amazing car, rally car, right? I look at the rally cars of that era; it's just unbelievable what came out of Europe at that time. Group B
Yeah.
rally, like, come on, who didn't
Oh.
want to be a Group B rally driver? So, but again, it's that theater of driving. It's like that experience that they're selling you on, like, come and drive the shit out of me,
Yeah. Well, that's a great point. I feel like there are certain vehicles out there that's exact, like, you see them and it's like they do taunt you. They're like,
Yeah. Oh, they do
come on,
taunt me. Yeah.
like, come
Yep.
on. Like, I've got more for you than you can handle, but come on.
An old Celica Supra, like, really a Skyline GTR. Like, come on, these cars are
Hmm.
just like a Porsche. Like, I would kill to have a Porsche. Like, again, it'd probably kill me. So, but I love that stuff. It's like the engineering and what it's selling you. Just, beyond design is that
Yeah.
experience, that user experience of just driving the car, and what could it be? It's like, I have friends that collect cars, and it's like, man, I want to drive them all. I wish I could. I just wish I could.
Well, that's the goal, right? I mean, I'm super fortunate with what I do, is that I get to
Mhm.
experience a lot of not only new cars, but a lot of old cars. I get to
Yeah.
experience a lot of what other people's vision of their perfect old hot rod is, or their perfect old muscle car.
Mm.
And it's amazing, because what I generally find is that, you know, people are so passionate about these things, and they'll put their own tiny touches on these vehicles that
Oh
make
yeah.
them
Hmm.
uniquely theirs. And it's like, I always tell people, like, so every now and then we'll get submissions for cars, and they'll be like, you should really drive this or do that. And a lot of times I'll ask the owners, I'm like, how many miles have you put on this thing last year? and they might tell me, I don't know, only about 100 or only this. When I first heard that, it used to get me really annoyed, and that they didn't drive it and they weren't experienced in it. And it took me a while to realize that you can get a ton of enjoyment out of just having it, out of just looking at it, out of just being in its presence. So like for me, like my pinnacle of cars, like my favorite car of all time is a 71 Lamborghini Miura. I look at that car every
Ooh,
time
oh,
and it just I
another
stare
phenomenal
at it.
car. Oh my
Now,
God.
I have a friend that has one. I physically can't drive it because I am too big. I am too big. My feet are too big. I don't fit. That doesn't mean that if I had the means, I wouldn't instantaneously buy one, because I would, even though I know I physically can't drive it. But every time I look at it, I just go, Jesus Christ, that thing is just like, that's akin to it's a work of art. Like I would stick it in my
Yeah.
living room, walk
Oh,
by it every morning, and go,
oh
yeah,
my
this is
God.
totally the worth the $1.3 million I spent or whatever, you know.
I just want to look at the headlights. Can I just look at the headlights all day?
Yeah, that's it. That's it. You know, but that's, I think, where design comes in, and it has the capacity to just to kind of capture you and suck you into a point where I almost feel bad for people that, I mean, everybody's got their passion. There's no question about that. But I do sometimes feel bad for people that can't see the beauty in objects like that. You know, and as somebody like yourself that can actually create those objects, I just look, I can't create shit, but you create. That to me is an amazing thing.
Thanks. No, thanks. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. It's weird. My brother's a doctor, right? So,
Mhm.
and he's super green, super low carbon footprint, runs his house up geothermal, has solar panels and everything. Would rather bike, to do anything and
Mhm.
go on walks. And it's like just not really into the technology
Yeah,
side of
you
things.
pull
He's
up
like,
in a 73 Challenger, blah 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 blah.
yeah, and I go and I'm talking to his kids about, my old car, and the kids are like, "What's that?" And it's like, what did you do to these kids? It's like, oh my God, you drive a Subaru. Like, I love the fact that you drive a Subaru, but dude, come on.
Yeah.
So he was in that car, the 70 Challenger with me, growing up, and he was in
Yeah.
the Volkswagen. So anyway, but it's different. Everyone's got their thing.
So where do you see that, you've been doing this a long time? We're in 2023 right now. Where do you see the future of design going? Right. I mean, it has nothing to do with powertrain. I mean, we know EVs are here. We know we have
Yeah,
hybrids. There's
yeah.
still ICE cars running around everywhere. They're not going anywhere. Um, but what do you see as the future of design, and
Man.
how and where it's going to go as far as the automobile and trucks and things like that?
Ooh, ooh. So we're at an interesting crossroads because
Hmm.
technology has gotten to the point right now, in every sense, where rules can be broken, but there's a certain stigma that people have with design, with cars, that say that these rules have to be applied. Like if you think about autonomy, right? Just autonomy in general, right?
Yeah.
Cars that can drive yourself. Why does it need a windshield? If the car's driving itself, who cares? Right? It's
Hmm.
full of sensors. It doesn't matter. So why are you held by a certain shape? Right?
Hmm.
If you think about like status and things and what that means, like if you look at cars from the 20s, status cars, they're 18 feet long. What's to prevent us
Yeah.
from doing that? Right? Architecture. That's it. Right? If you think about like tooling and what's going on with tooling right now, the whole additive manufacturer thing, like additive manufacturing, they're printing aluminum shaped parts that are out of this world. They look more like bones than anything, right? They
Yeah.
can look like anything. There is a certain aesthetic component of that. Like we're going to see skin removed off of cars. We're going to see skin removed out of interiors because different safety features there. We're at the point right now where probably in the next 20, 30 years, we're going to see things that we never thought we'd ever see. I mean, Harley
Yeah.
Earl couldn't have predicted it. No one could have predicted. Technology is
Right.
so fluent right now that things are going to change. Like plastic panels, okay, big deal, right? What other kind of materials like carbon fiber? Like we're seeing carbon fiber panels being popped off of classics all day long,
Hmm.
lightweight things. Like we're going to see things in racing we never thought were possible, right?
Yeah.
Magnesium, like just all this technology can be applied to design in such a way. But it's like we've got this rule book. It's like you open it up, like, oh, cars need to do this, they need to do this, they got to have suspension clearances for this, the tires got to be like this. Like, throw it away.
Right.
there's gonna be a part of that that gets thrown away, where you're gonna see some really inventive stuff, and people are just gonna go crazy. It's like, like I always look at the trends coming out of SEMA and coming
Hmm.
out of like
Yeah. Yeah.
Autorama, like the hot rodders, they get it. They're embracing all this technology and this crazy stuff that even faster than the industry can, right? And it's like I've gone, so at work I go to all these shows, right? I go to the car
Yeah.
shows and I bring in these pictures and I show people like, look at what this guy's doing. This guy is putting a red
Yeah.
interior in a blue car, and people were like, oh, I can't do that. Like, why not?
Why not?
Why not? Ferrari's done it. Ferrari's put a blue interior in a red car. Like, the customer wants it. Like, why would you not do that? Like,
Right.
oh, well, that's a lot. Like, well, contrast, right? It's like, you used to do this carte blanche style for cars. Like, what else can be done? Like, you can completely custom order, a car, like, and we've done that, right?
Hmm.
So you're gonna see a lot of different things. I mean, I see the industry embracing that. Like, you see, companies like Zinger, doing all these 3D printed,
Yeah.
frames and everything. And I have a good designer friend over there too. But like, you see guys like the Ring brothers embracing technology, printing
Hmm.
stuff out, working with designers to shape these cars and to take things that, were, I guess you could say, appliances, and make them something that just
Yeah.
are incredible. So I think we're going to see a lot of like molds being broken on a lot of
Yeah.
things, and seatings and layouts and materials and processes. And we're just starting to get into that. But there's another portion of things that is coming, and it's going to be a great tidal wave too. And it's just like the green aspect of things, right? So it's like being conscious of what chemicals you're using, what processes you're using that are harmful in the environment. I mean, I know California has been up and up on that stuff and doing waterborne paints for
Oh
years.
yeah.
So there's a lot of that too. But I'm always excited. Like, there's a tendency like, oh, I'm old, I'm set in my ways, I'm
Yeah.
gonna do this. But I'm the first guy that raises his hand like, what does that mean? How do I get there? Like, what do I do?
Hmm.
Like, how can I use this to my advantage? Like, electric cars came in, and it's like, at the time I was working in Mopar, I'm like, I want to figure this out. Like, I want to talk to every
Yeah.
electronic manufacturer that's out there. Like, what am I missing out on here? There's something that's growing as an industry. Like, and I see all these different processes that are now becoming available to people, and it's like, what does this mean for our industry? It's like, it's like the gates are opening, and all this stuff's going to come flooding out. It's like, I see people with these rule books, and I'm like, man, throw it away. Throw it away. Give me something cool. Dare me to do something stupid with my money.
Dude.
And that's why I draw. It's like I try to challenge people on their paradigms of what hot rodding is, and like,
Yeah.
like, could you do a carbon blow molded frame and put on a car like a bike? Like, the bike industry just flopped it on its sides. Like, used to be these TIG welded tubes together,
Hmm.
arc welded tubes, like, and then it got into carbon, and then milled aluminum, and now it's printed stuff, and you're looking at these really high tech things, and remote derailleurs and stuff. Like, where's the application on automotive for that? Like, it's coming, it's happening.
Dude, you have so much enthusiasm for design and so much
I'm
enthusiasm for
sponge.
I feel like if we lived for another 200 years, you'd probably still have the same amount of enthusiasm and
Always,
doing this and designing
always.
and trying to make all this. It is just, I have to be honest, it's infectious, because I think there's so many times when, us as enthusiasts, whether we're looking at cars or trying to buy a car or build a car or design or do whatever the case is, where we'll hit a wall. You know what I mean? And it's so amazing that there are people like you out there that are just like, just shut up and break the rule book. Just go out and play and, screw up and then redo. And then it's great, Dan. It
Show me
is.
something I haven't seen before. It's like, that's the one thing that I always say. It's like, okay, great. Anyone can customize a car. I can put big wheels on a car. I can, restore it to the nth degree and get all the markings on it. It's like, there's a certain level of respect for that. Like the McCacken show that's going on right
Mhm.
now. It's like, that's another holy grail show. It's like, I love that show for what it is. And then I look at the stuff that's out there for Autorama, and it's like, you see people that they'll build a nice Willis, they'll build a nice, 38 Chevy or
Mhm.
whatever. But the guys that are out there that are doing some really, just unique stuff and harnessing the technology. Like, I want to talk to those guys. Like, we used to go around to Autorama and, because we're designers, we walk around in a group, we have beer in our hand, walk up, start talking.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm a designer at so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. I saw your build and
Yeah.
I heard about you guys. They invite us up on a stand. We have, we hang around with these guys. They talked about process and what we're doing and, ask us questions and, we relate back, hey, here's an
Yeah.
experience, or talk to so-and-so for this. And it's like, you only grow by sharing and it's like, I'm so enthralled by that. Like, seeing something different. Like, I see people like on Instagram or whatever, they're just starting out their careers or just starting. And I'm like, go, just keep going, just keep pushing. Like, I'll definitely share with them like techniques and tips and trying to like, you can't
Yeah.
grow as a community by just staying, I'm gonna be in this little box right here.
Well, dude, I have to say we're coming up on an hour, so unfortunately we have to wrap this show up. But
yeah.
Dan, where can everybody find you? Where can they find your artwork? Where can they find all the stuff that you put out as far as you do, your sketches and everything?
Yeah.
Is Instagram the best place to go?
Yeah,
just
Instagram
tell
is
us.
great. Yep, Instagram is great. So DMZ73. I've got some artwork that I've been doing in collaboration with some other members. So I just worked with Albies on this new T-shirt.
Nice.
And then I've actually got some stuff on Bob Haro Designs. So we did some T-shirts together. So Guy is a ninja and an inspiration to me. I'm very fortunate just to be able to draw and be inspired by everybody, but love to collaborate. Unfortunately my time is like this right now.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So, but and then I post up on Facebook and everything too, but maybe more someday.
Well, dude, Dan, thank you for coming on. This has been so much fun as always.
Thank you.
I mean,
thank you. I'm humbled.
Dude, the biggest problem was we could have kept talking for another 6 hours and been totally
Absolutely.
fine.
Absolutely.
So what we're definitely after the holidays, you're coming back on. We're gonna do this again because this was way too much fun.
Anytime, my friend. Anytime. You know what? We should do this with more. I've got a bunch of garage buddies. It'd just be like hanging out.
I would love to do that, dude. That's awesome. All
cool.
right, sir. Dan, thank you again.
Take care. And thank you so much. I appreciate your time. This has been awesome. Thank you. I'm humbled.
Very cool, Dan. We'll talk to you all soon. Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast and hit that subscribe button, and we'll come to you every week.